Lead advertisers. History shows that you're going to have some choppy dynamics in the month of September. In this episode of the Paid Traffic Forecast, we're going to go through what the next month looks like for you, the hot spots and cold spots you need to pay attention to, what the projection models say what you can expect from your numbers, and the 3 things you can do to prepare for a rough Q4. More on that right after this. Hey there, and welcome to the September 2025 Paid Traffic Forecast for Lead Advertisers. I'm John Belcher, the founder here at Decyphered. That's Ross Pietersen, the head of media buying, and we're excited to show you what's around the corner for your campaigns for the next 30 days. Quick overview of what we're going to go through. 4 things. September outlook, what the last 5 years tells us is likely in store for you as a lead advertiser. The hot spots and cold spots, Ross is going to tell you what dates you need to pay attention to and the actions you may need to take. I'm going to go through some projection models and tell you what your numbers could look like depending on what you focus on. And then finally, the cost environment playbook. I'm going to give you 3 actions you can take to maximize your results and or prepare for the future. So let's start by talking about the September outlook. And to do that, I want to give you a quick overview of how this forecast was created. So my job is to project results here for our clients at Decyphered. And in order to do that, I wanted to have a model I could apply that would give us a really accurate understanding of the performance a month before things took place. So I looked at the CPM trends on Meta for the last 5 years for each of the conversion types. There's 4, using hundreds of millions of dollars in ad spend. And I developed a simple projection model that I tested, and we found that we could project within about 5% of actual results for clients spending more than $1 million a month in ad spend. Now, what's important for you to understand is while we use metadata to develop this projection model, we've determined that this applies across all platforms, Meta, Google, native, and it's starting to apply to AppLove and as more advertisers are coming on board. What's important for you to understand is it's a forecast, not a prophecy. So the goal is to give you a good understanding of what's coming up, but things can change. Just like the weather forecast, they may say it rained and it doesn't, or they may say it's going to be sunny and it rains. Things change all the time. The goal is just to give you a good overview of what to look for, so you're not being reactionary with everything that you're doing. So this is the forecast for lead advertisers. Honestly, it's pretty steady Eddie. We're expecting to see a 1.5% increase in CPMs over the course of the month of September. There's some very specific things you need to pay attention to that Ross will talk about in just a second. But what I want to make sure you understand is I know as a direct response advertiser, you don't care about CPMs. You care about CPAs and ROAS. But what's really important for you to understand is there's a linear correlation in the changes in CPMs to your CPAs. And the reason for that is because it all comes down to volume of impressions. That determines how many people are going to enter your funnel and therefore the cost to acquire people and your ROAS. So while you may not care about CPMs, they're a great indicator of what's about to happen. And so we're expecting a 1.5% increase, which isn't crazy, but there's a few things that we're going to need to pay attention to. And Ross is going to dig into that right now when we talk about hot spots and cold spots. Take it away, Ross.
So just to quickly cover what a hotspot and cold spot is, it's by simple definition, a change in CPM in a short space of time. Hotspot, quick change in a quick increase in cost in CPM. Cold spot is a quick decrease in a very short space of time. So we've highlighted, John, for September, there's 3 significant dates. Those all actually being in the first half of the month, the 1st of September, 3rd of September, and the 10th of September. Now, the 1st of September is a hotspot, 3rd and 10th are cold spots, and you'll see this is all very much front-loaded in the beginning half of September. First, we're seeing a hotspot, very likely, you would know because very likely Labor Day campaigns are happening then, and then we're recovering very short period of time into a cold spot. And then around the 10th of the month, we're going to see a brief cold spot, and then towards the back end of the month, things are pretty steady Eddie. That's pretty much what the forecast looks like in terms of significant dates. I think it's important. Let's maybe quickly touch on what a hotspot feels like, John. So specifically as we go into it, we're seeing our cost per lead go up. And those of you who are running ads without cost controls like TCP, so target cost per action or bid caps, you're what we call an uncontrolled advertiser. You're going to likely see some underspend. If you do have those cost controls in place, you'll see underspend and very likely some of your ads will stop spending. I think what we
So
should quickly,
I just want to clarify really quickly definition. Uncontrolled is like if you go on Facebook and you just set up a campaign, right?
that's
There's
correct.
you're not using any bid caps, cost caps, target CPAs. This would be like a manual CPC if you're doing something on Google. That's uncontrolled, right? And so you're saying for those advertisers, they'd experience some underspend. And then if you do have those things in place, you're going to have underspend and potentially stop spending entirely. So I just wanted to clean up definitions. Go ahead.
Yeah, 100%. So, and it's a good spot to what that might feel like is if you have a campaign running at $100 a day, underspend would be spending $60 a day. That would be what we define as underspend. So you're not utilizing 100% of that budget. I think what is next important is if we can quickly cover some of the big mistakes you can make in those hotspot scenarios. Quickly, a call out here is what we're trying to avoid. There's a big risk of a budget waste and a huge risk in break instability. So those of you who, as John just spoke about now, are uncontrolled advertisers, so you're really just running without constraints. One of the biggest mistakes you can make is not actually monitoring your budget usage. This is something you and I do daily. We're monitoring the budget. It's an indicator of what's happening. It's really just the pulse of your account. The other thing, big mistake you can make is just boosting those budgets to try and combat that underspend. So if you're seeing, oh, I'm only spending $60, all of a sudden you push that budget, there's very little you're going to do to get back those impressions. And the last thing for those uncontrolled advertisers, and we typically see it, was you just say, oh, it's a bad day on Facebook. And I think this is a rookie mistake because as you and I have seen, John, like in the last couple of weeks, we're almost seeing weekly outages from Facebook. So things do happen there, but not understanding why those things are changing and just simply saying, oh, it's the network really isn't. Yeah, it's a rookie move. So paying attention to those.
And the way that we see this in particular on social media is people will talk about, oh, the algorithm changed. And they're like, no, this was something we've expected for a month. It's just making sure that you're paying attention to this, right? That's really what this is about, is if you're getting choked out, it's important to know, like, this is all in the works. And that's why I want you to have this information.
Yeah, 100%. Favorite line. And if you're in the controlled advertising space, so using those guardrails of bid caps or targets, smart bidding on Google, big mistake you can make is raising that bid, raising that target CPA. In that scenario, what you're doing is saying to the algorithm, saying to machine learning, oh, I'm willing to tolerate higher costs. So all of a sudden, it's going to go and look for different volume of people, different tiers of people, different buckets. You're going to be breaking all the learning that you've put in place prior to that. That's going to completely wreck your performance. The other thing is thinking those budget fixes are going to fix those underspend, especially in the controlled advertiser space. You and I have seen, John, time and time again, we try and raise those budgets. Doesn't matter what we do to those budgets. That ad is not going to spend. The costs are just too high to tolerate. And with those ads that aren't performing within that CPM cost environment, they just don't get delivery. And the other thing is,
Go ahead.
And the last point is just forgetting in these scenarios that your strongest ads are the ones that are going to deliver your results. So you and I know that there's some ads that in certain cost environments perform and they're just on the fringe. And those ads in higher cost environments just stop delivering. But our ads that continue running through these hotspots, continue delivering, they may not deliver brilliantly, they may underdeliver, but those are the ones that kind of stand this higher cost period.
And the reason this last point is so important is because if you're spending $10,000 a day on Google with target CPA, but 5,000 of that is in your top performing ad, you may see your bottom half completely drop off. So your spend on Google goes down by $5,000. And this is where Ross is talking about this increasing the budgets, trying to get that volume back. You're going to go ramp up your top ad, raise bids, and then you're ruining everything for something that was really predictable. The last thing I want to mention is these actions are extremely problematic in the particular environment we're talking about because you're seeing a hot spot with a cold spot very likely to follow it immediately. And so, Ross, let's dig in now with the cold spots. What happens and the mistakes that people may make?
So in all fairness, Sean, there's more risk on the cold spot front because what you now have is this overspend. So it might feel like, oh, great, everything's loosening up. But this is where some serious instability can come into play. And we've put a slide in to show a real world example, but what's happening now is the costs are coming down and you might feel a sense of, oh, great, we're going to take advantage of this. Huge mistake in this scenario is really riding this wave of overspend. So let's quickly go through the risks and then we'll show you a real life example of what this looks like. And the risk we're trying to avoid is extending this recovery period and actually ruining our account stability and our ability to produce results. For you, if you're an uncontrolled advertiser, those of you without constraints, big here, ignoring that overspend. So if you're spending $100 a day and all of a sudden you spend 140, but you've just set your campaigns to set it and forget it, that's a key indicator of you're all of a sudden, you're in a cold spot and something's changing. Big changes in budget as a reaction from this is also, you're just creating waves in a massive pool that is already choppy. The other big mistake is scaling too soon before the performance stabilizes. You need to let the overspend stop, settle down, and then you can go back to normal situation. Because while this volatility is happening in this overspend, essentially what this machine learning is doing is it needs stable, consistent delivery at the cost you want. Otherwise, you're giving it false, incorrect, dirty data. If you're in controlled advertising space and you're using cost controls, again, ignoring that overspend, changing these bids, maybe dropping them all of a sudden, as I mentioned in the hotspot, if you're now all of a sudden changing the target cost that you wanted the algorithm to find you before, and you're moving these signals all the time, you're just resetting your learning, messing up the performance that you've already put in. And generally speaking, on this last point, what normally happens in these scenarios when you have ads stop performing, you'll very likely have to restart them and rebuild them. And when you rebuild them, to think that you can get back up to the spend that they were really quickly is a big mistake. You need to start them again. They're independent, they're new campaigns, they've got new IDs, they've got to get their own learning again. You've got to scale them up like you did and how you got them there before.
And I can raise my hand and say I'm the culprit for that last point. My historical reaction is, all right, Ross, it looks like we can't get these back on track. Let's rebuild them, but let's start them at the budget that they were at. So if we'd ramped an ad from our normal, we call it a scaling ladder, we bump it up through the process. If it was spending $2,000 a day in a good cost environment, I'll be like, hey, Ross, we're over this hump. Go build and start at $2,000 a day. It just doesn't perform. And so Ross has really been the break for me to say, hey, man, we got to start this at 300 and it's going to take us a week to re-ramp this as long as performance is there. It's really hard to do that because you're focusing on volume, but that's just become the thing with our clients. It's like, hey guys, we want you to know, not only are we about to experience this choppiness, it's going to take us a week to rebuild because we have to ramp up following our rules. That's how we generate sustainable, predictable scale. And so it's slower than everyone wants, but that's what we have to get back to a level of production. Before we dive in and show the real life example, I want to make one thing really clear. So I'm going to come back here to our September forecast. The reason these being so close together is problematic is if you're not ready for this hotspot and your team goes in and says, hey, we're getting choked out on volume, let's go increase our budgets. And they ramp up for these 3 days and they're increasing budgets to try and get spend. You are going to make this cold spot dramatically worse because you're not going to get more spend out in this hotspot. What's going to happen though is Google and Facebook look at this as a 7-day window and the amount of budget that they're allowed to spend. So if you ramp up your budgets, it's now going to overspend even more on the downslope here. And so this is why it's so important to know when hotspots are coming up. Leave it alone. Let it come in because it's already going to overspend if you leave your budgets alone. But if you go and increase your budget, it's going to make it worse than ever. And as Ross said, it's going to take longer to recover. So that's why this particular closely grouped set of hotspots and cold spots can be really problematic for you at the beginning of September. All right, Ross. So let's dig in and let's talk about this real life example.
So what we're looking at here is a cold spot. Essentially, what you're seeing here is one of my daily optimizations. This is a snapshot of one of my ad setups, and you'll see what we've set every single ad set to. There's a budget there, and then we're pulling exactly how much was spent for the day. And what you'll see in our last column is an indicator of how much of that budget was spent. And a clear indication here is we've got everything that's orange and everything that's yellow is over 100%. Whereas if I set a budget at say 320, I now all of a sudden had a spend of a $417, which is 130% of spend. Now, I knew this was coming based on the forecast. So really all I did was send John a message saying, hey, John, we're having this thing. We've got some overspend. I'm anticipating it. And my mindset now is I don't want to make too many changes. I anticipate tomorrow we'll have a little bit of this, but in 2 days' time, this will settle and then I can go back to normal proceedings. The more budget changes I make during this period, the more volatility I'm introducing. I want to minimize this period of volatility, so I let everything spend as it should. We'll come back to normal spend, and then it's business as usual.
And this has been a massive optimization on Ross's end of checking and this daily budget versus how much we actually spent. And looking at this utilization has been a massive improvement for us on performance. The other thing to note is Meta has had a ton of outages recently, and this exacerbates the cold spot where what happens is if it experiences a delivery problem, it's going to way over deliver on a day to try and make up that spend. And so that's another thing that Ross has been looking out for is getting status notifications when outages are happening, particularly on Meta. This just exacerbates the problem. And we've had one a week for like the past 2 months. And so this is adding to the dynamics of how CPM utilization, budget utilization takes place. So it's just really important to be dialed in to be able to see these things. Ross, anything else you want to cover?
It's important for advertisers to also understand how ad networks work. We have a very standard procedure. We launch campaigns in the beginning of a day. And you need to remember when you set a daily budget, your ad network is going to try and spend that budget through the day. And in that incident you were talking about, John, we had an early outage. Now, normally that would have been fine. That early outage recovered around midday EST, and that was great. But what happened is because we had such a low underspend in the beginning half of the day, all of a sudden, the algorithm, now the way the spend engine works, it wants to spend that daily budget. So it accelerated the spend towards the back end of the day and overspent to try and hit the spend. And the reason why that impacts us with that particular client, there's parts of a day that perform and there's parts of that day that don't. Typically, every business is going to have that kind of thing. People move in different ways. And that was a really, really bad day because we had massive overspend because of this overcorrection. And these are things we're paying attention to. But to your point, I think people think, oh, CPMs don't matter. The reason why they matter is it's about impressions and they're indicators. So they matter because they're indicators of what is about to happen, and that affects our performance. And that's ultimately what we are. We're performance marketers trying to deliver results. We're just looking at these indicators which give us clues.
Perfect. Thanks, Ross. So those are the hot spots and cold spots you're going to have to pay attention to and what you need to be looking for. All right, Ross, let's talk a little bit about the seasonal macro trends that layer on top of this.
So we've got our annual calendar, which we outline. We look at every month and see what are some big things that are potentially happening in this month. And these are things like big brand advertiser buys. So big retail moments, big events in that month that actually affect all advertisers. And essentially it's these advertisers buying up inventories, impressions on CPMs, which are much cheaper, which means you and I are able to buy less impressions. What that looks like for September's for lead advertisers is we're seeing two things stacked on top of each other. One, your end of month as well as end of quarter. We're coming up to the end of Q3. So typically we see big brands having some extra budget. They need to make sure they spend those budgets. We also see that at the end of the month, but now we've got them stacked. So while we don't have anything forecast in terms of hotspots and cold spots, there's definitely something to look out for from about the 18th to the 30th of September, where we're expecting some volatility here.
And I think what's really important to call out is end of quarter is so much worse than end of month. We see way bigger impact in that last 2 weeks. And I used to think it was just going to be like the last 5 days. It's actually the end of quarter dumps are like more here, and the end of month is just at the end here. It creates a really big ripple effect in the month of September. And so it's important for you to understand. We do this with our clients. We basically tell them, hey, we need to produce most of our volume. So if our 100% of our volume projection is between the beginning and the end, we need to be like 85% by here, because we're going to start to experience more ripples as we work through this. And so once again, just really important for you to know and understand, you've got your optimization event specific hot spots and cold spots. And then these are kind of the global ones that are going to impact everybody just based off impressions being bought up. So thanks, Ross, for walking us through that. And letting people know what's around the corner. All right, let's dive into projection models really quickly. Once again, my role here is to ensure that I can tell our clients what they can expect on a monthly basis based off what we were seeing in the prior month. So the goal for me with the projection is to view the CPM impact on results. What does the cost environment mean for the overall P&L? A couple variables we consider: the number of selling days, and I've highlighted it for this month because it's important. August had 31 days. September only has 30. So right there, we have one fewer selling days, which is really important to communicate to clients. Hey, we're probably not going to produce what we did last month because we have one fewer selling days. If you want this, we're going to have to increase our spend in a higher cost environment if you want to make up that revenue. So really important to talk through that. In addition, conversion rate changes. So if you experience a big decrease or increase between September and August, and this is kind of, I'm going to use supplements as an example. July and August are typically awful for supplements, but there's a rebound in September through like the middle of October. So going through and layering in seasonal conversion rate changes that you're aware of with your projections is really important. I haven't done either one of these with the example. I just wanted to kind of give you an understanding of how we do this process, but these are two really important things to take into account. The result of this is asking, what is our evergreen production going to be? So what can we expect our evergreen proven base of campaigns to produce? That's really important to be like, if we didn't make any changes, no wins, roughly what can we expect? And then based off our goals for the month, this gives us a conclusion of what do we need to focus on this month so we can be ready for the future, and how risky should those tasks, those actions be? So we're going to go over the projection models, and then we're going to go over the playbook to cover both of these things. So really quickly, an understanding of how I do this, I build out a massive spreadsheet. This is dramatically streamlined. But basically what I do is I look at our August production. I say, if we spent this and this is how our funnel converted, what can we expect with the CPM changes? And we build 3 models. What happens if we maintain our spend? What happens if we maintain our conversion volume? And what happens if we maintain our cost per conversion? So if we look at this from a graphical perspective and say, in the month of August, we've spent $100,000 and produced X, what's going to happen just based off CPMs? And so when we talk about this maintaining spend, because our CPMs are going up 1.5%, that means for the same $100,000, we're going to reach 1.5% fewer people. So we're going to see an increase in cost per lead and a decrease in ROAS just based off cost dynamics. If that's something that the client doesn't want to stomach, then we're going to have to go in and say, hey, we want to maintain our volume. We're going to have to push into our higher CPMs, which means we're going to have to go spend more. Now, in this case, it's only 3% because it's not a huge difference in CPMs. But if we see a 10% increase, we're going to have to push way harder into those higher CPMs, which is going to cost us to spend not a linear amount. It's going to be a more exponential amount more. And then finally, if the client says, hey, we cannot stomach higher CPAs, then we go through and develop our final model, which is maintaining our cost per lead. And what's really important to understand with this is I put less than or equal to this $97,000. We're not talking about a massive increase in costs. So this is not as big of a deal. We're only talking about $3,000 difference. But as you start to get these bigger shifts in CPM changes, this is really important, this like less than or equal to. Ross and I talk about this in terms of like the stock market. If you have a fixed bid that you're putting in, if your fixed bid is at or above market price, then all of your orders are going to get filled. But as you start to decrease your bid below market price, not all of your orders are going to get filled, which means this is a best case scenario of what you're going to be able to spend with, taking these cost changes into account. So that's kind of a graphical view of what it is that we're trying to provide our clients. We give them 3 options and then determine what we want to do next. And so the conclusions from September is you're going to see costs going up slightly and results going down slightly, but not really that much of a change. And so the actions we want to take for this is if our results are planning to be pretty similar and the client's happy with what we're talking about, we really want to focus on prepping for Q4 because we know we're going to see massive cost increase as we move into October, November, and December. And so that's where we move into our cost environment playbook. There's 3 actions that we're going to take to try and prepare for the future. So because we're in this steady cost environment, we're willing to take some medium risk actions. So just to make this clear, high cost environments, we want to take low risk actions. We don't want to try and test a bunch of new stuff because they're likely to not work. And then if we're also doing it at higher costs, huge problems. Steady costs, we want to take a little bit of medium risk actions, things that we're willing to try out because we're not going to experience a whole lot of volatility, but we still don't want to go crazy. And then low cost environments when we want to take our riskier actions. So in the steady cost environment, there's 3 things that we want to talk through. CRO testing is our high lift play. This requires a lot of work, but has the opportunity to make a difference. Our medium lift play is migrating our proven angles on our best mediums, in this case, video, over to new mediums, image and advertorial. And then our low lift play is form software testing. I want to kind of talk through one that we did recently that helped our clients save $15,000 a year. So the first one is CRO testing. It's really important to dissect your funnel performance and identify which steps hold the most leverage to reduce any CAC amount that you're looking at for the same amount of improvement. So we actually have a part of our dashboards that shows us what is the potential decrease in CAC or cost per lead or cost per sale, whatever you're looking at, determining with a lead client, based off every 1% improvement we make. So we did this exercise with a client and we determined that with every 1% we improved their opt-in rate, we would produce another $40,000 in revenue. Well, that's something that was massive for us. So focusing on that made a ton of sense. And then it allowed us to go through and brainstorm the different tests we wanted to run for the month. So I know that was a little bit of an abstract example. We actually have 2 podcast episodes in our podcast, The Scaling Game, that goes through and shows you exactly how we did this. So the first one is episode 3 is high ticket sales. It's a 2-call close. We show how we lowered CAC by 60% and 5x their revenue in 5 months using this exact same type of scenario. The second one is for a click to call business. We were able to increase their spend by 400% and also lowering their CAC by 17% using the same process. And we're also able to migrate across platforms. This client is now spending 10 times what they were when we started with them while having their CAC stay exactly the same. And so you can go through and check out those podcast episodes to be able to see exactly how this process works. All right. Our medium lift play is taking proven angles and migrating them to new mediums. So what's important in higher cost times, you want to be able to put more spend on multiple creative types, and images are great. They typically are the lowest cost actions that you get on ad platforms. And so now is the time you can use to migrate your video ads and images to advertorials to utilize all that inventory and potentially lower costs. So an example for you, by turning our top performing video ads to images and advertorials, we've been able to grow one client's lead gen business by 30%. It's about $300,000 a month in ad spend. And the key is to migrate everything about the angle possible. You're just targeting readers instead of watchers. Ross, do you want to add anything here about the impact once we started to do this for this client?
Interesting thing, and we're video heavy first. We've often found we benchmarked for the particular client what that cost per call was for a video. And obviously we're watching the back end of that in terms of close rate and the actual acquisition number. An interesting dynamic we kind of looked at when we changed to a image and advertorial funnel is we noticed that our back end metrics were still good. We were getting a good close rate and a good CPA number, but our cost per call was much higher. So what we were allowed us to do was look at 2 different mediums, video and image, and set 2 different benchmarks. We were still coming out profitable at the end, but it allows us to say, man, when we have video, we can have a lower cost. When we have image, we're allowed to go up to a higher cost because those numbers make sense. And it was real interesting because this is the same angle that we produced. So our creative team produced the same angle, just put it in image and read format. And we then just made sure that it backed out and made sure the numbers worked on the back end.
Yeah, really good point to call out. And I think when we talk about higher cost, it was like 40% higher cost per call, but the CPMs were the same. And the reason in my head that that took place is people do not watch all of the video before they move forward in the process. Where people who read, since the action is at the bottom of the page, they're actually consuming all of the information. And that's why we're seeing better close rates, people who are more conditioned because they're not able to skip any of the content. They're consuming it before they move forward in the process. And that was just a really important note that Ross called out, is that difference in the micro costs before you reach your macro costs of CPA. It's really important to be able to not only visualize that, but adjust your benchmarks based off those format types. So really good call out, Ross. Thank you. All right. And then the last one, our lowest lift play, is new form testing. So for all of our clients that we do these lead gen funnels for, we've had success leveraging Typeform or a similar form builder like Jotform. We recently heard about this new product called Uform that is our biggest complaint with Typeform just came down to cost. We're doing millions of form submits, right? And so this was something we went through and tested in a steady cost environment. And we're able to prove that performance stayed the same. I actually worked with their CTO to get all the tracking things that we needed in place. And if you decide to leverage it, you actually can access all the tutorials I put together for that. This saved our client $15,000 a year in overhead just for the software expense. And it didn't change performance at all. The other thing I really like about it is upon redirect, we were able to do this like confetti, congrats, you've qualified. It improved the user experience and allowed us to make sure that the pages did more of the content and not so much of like the, hey, congrats, you qualified. So this type of a product was a really, really good fit. Couple notes about Uform is, unless you're using massive volumes like we are, it's $29 a month fixed for like 50,000 form submits. And this was massive. And if you actually use the link down in the description, you can get 50% off using our link. So we only promote this kind of stuff when we actually use the platforms. And I would highly recommend going and giving it a trial to see if it makes a difference for you and your business, because it'll save you a ton of money in the long run. So those are the three plays that we talked through. Steady cost environment. First one is CRO testing. I gave you 2 podcast episodes you can check out. The proven angles to new mediums, so video to image and advertorial. If you want some more information on this, let us know and we can kind of talk through the process that we leverage here. I just want to make sure we're talking about stuff that's relevant. And then finally, that new form software testing not only can make a difference for you in user experience, but it can put a lot of money back in your pocketbook. So 3 things for you to test in the month of September to prepare for Q4. Thanks for watching this month's paid traffic forecast. Just by watching it, you and your team now know what to expect from your overall performance and the hot spots and cold spots you need to pay attention to over the next 30 days. If you want to be this prepared every month, there's 2 things you can do. First, you can subscribe or follow our social channels so this information shows up in your feed at the beginning of every month. Second, if you want the information early, you can subscribe to our free list where you'll get the information delivered to your inbox a day ahead of time. If there's something you think we can do to improve our monthly update, just drop us a comment below and let us know what you think that is. And finally, if you're a business owner looking for someone who can help you develop an advertising ecosystem that produces more sustainable, predictable scale, make sure to head over to decyphered.com/start. On that page, you'll understand how our process works and the steps you can take to see if we might be a good fit to help you. Thanks so much, and we'll see you next month.